This presentation, titled Moving Past the Minimum QMS Requirements for Improvement, comes to us from Buddy Cressionnie. Buddy is the president of ASD Expertise LLC, which provides training, consulting, and auditing services to the aviation, space, and defense ASD industry. Buddy's standard development activities throughout his career have included America's Aerospace Quality Systems Committee, AAQSC chair, AAQSC America's lead of the IAQG Requirement Strategy Stream, and AAQG Projects chair, responsible for 26 standards, AAQSC America's 9100 team lead, IAQG liaison to the TAG to ISO TC 176, participating in ISO 9001 2015 writing, ISO 9001 2015 interpretations, ISO 9004 writing, and future concepts. Prohibitus Aerospace Industry Experience Auditor for 9100, 9110, and 9120, and more than 35 years in the ASD industry and quality. And with that, take it away, Buddy.
Thank you very much. So this presentation is about moving past the minimum requirements, really for any quality management system. You heard from my introduction that I'm very involved with ASD, Aviation, Space, and Defense, but I believe I'll be presenting some tools today that are be helpful to any quality management system, whether you just have ISO 9001, the automotive standard, telecommunications, medical device, whatever it is. So many times organizations get certified, and there's usually some kind of a preparation activity where they ensure their compliance to the different requirements. They get audited. They either get statements of conformity or nonconformities during the audits. And then, of course, whenever there's a new revision, we also kind of, what changes do we need to go make for our quality management system? But really, the quality management system should never really be put up on a shelf. It should always be looked for continual improvement. And today, through this presentation, I'll be providing some tools for improvement for your quality management system. Here's the outline. First, I'd like to talk to you about some of the aviation, space, and defense tools, some of the requirements and such that we have that I believe would be beneficial for any quality management system. Next, understanding requirements. Once again, it's critical to understand the requirements that your system is required to comply with. And I'll share a correlation matrix that we've developed for aviation, space, and defense. There's numerous support materials. I'll be presenting improvement standards. Why go develop something yourself if there's improvement standards that already exist? And finally, I'll be presenting kind of a work in progress called the AIM model. AIM stands for Aerospace Improvement Maturity Model. If you're interested in even reading a little bit more, on the right-hand side, I've included the December 2019 Quality Progress Standards issue, and myself and Alan Daniels go through these different tools as here's ways to go improve. You can download a copy of the magazine. Once again, it's from December 2019, either from the ASQ website or from the IAQG.org website. So first, let's talk about using aviation, space, and defense standard requirements. First, a little bit of background on who are these people who are developing aviation, space, and defense. And when the introduction was started, there was a lot of acronyms. One of those was IAQG. It stands for International Aerospace Quality Group, launched in 1998, so we're in our 22nd year. The mission was all the aviation, space, and defense organizations from around the world coming together to look at how do we go drive common requirements within the supply chain, within the aviation, space, and defense market. How do we make improvements in quality and delivery? You make improvements in those, you consequently have reductions in cost, right, through all products and services through the whole value stream. So the way we do that is we launch strategies. We publish international standards. As was mentioned, we have 26 different standards. We have a scheme called ICOP, Industry Controlled Other Party Certifications. We have the ICOP scheme, so we rely upon third-party certification with oversight from industry. Instead of having each company go audit their suppliers, we rely upon certification body. We also have something called OASIS. It's a database with about 40,000 users, 22,000 suppliers in there. We also have best practices guidance material, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. So who makes up IAQG? Well, we have over 200 participating members, 59 aerospace and defense companies, 27 voting members of the council. We're organized into 3 geographical areas: the Americas. Through my intro, you heard that I'm the Americas leader for the requirements for the 26 standards, as well as for the 9100 standard. And notice that's also Americas. It includes North, Central, and South America. Then we also have EAQG in Europe, Asia Pacific, APAQG. So the aviation, space, and defense standards are based upon ISO 9001. Don't get me wrong, ISO 9001 is an excellent standard to have as a baseline. What we were finding, though, is that each different aviation, space, and defense company was flowing down similar types of requirements. All right, so we got together and said, why don't we all get together and agree on what those common sets of requirements are, so everybody could also do it the same way. It doesn't make sense, for example, for a supplier to have to fill out first article inspections one way for one customer, then use a different set of forms and requirements for another customer, and so on and so forth. So if we can standardize these requirements, it benefits our supply chain. So AS 9100 includes all the ISO 9001 requirements, plus it adds additional requirements. Now, what I would like to suggest to you is to get a copy of AS 9100. The most current version is Rev D, published in 2016. And look at the bold italics requirements. Those are the requirements over and above ISO 9001. We do a lot more than what ISO does with regards to risk. We have a requirement within Clause 8 for risk management, for operational processes, product type, or I should say product and service type risk, where we actually have requirements for how we're going to contract, how we're going to assess risk in the contracting process, how are we assessing risk during the design, purchasing, and production processes, and the service process. Configuration management, how to maintain configuration so the as contracted meets the as designed, the as built, and the as delivered, and the as maintained configurations. So also an excellent standard, ISO 10007 for configuration management as well. Product safety, due to the nature of our product, right? Safety is critical. This is not talking necessarily about occupational health and safety as we have here in the United States, but product safety with regard to the use of the product and to ensure the safe operation of the product. Prevention of counterfeit products. We're seeing more and more instances of counterfeit within our industry. What's kind of eye-opening is that in the past, counterfeit products were pretty easy to detect, and also they were included in very high-priced, very expensive products. What we're seeing now is that, first of all, it's very tough to identify counterfeit products. Sometimes you can only identify them within the full range of their operating capability. At nominal, they operate just fine. Also, what we're seeing is that we're seeing low price type items being counterfeited as well. Special requirements, critical items, key characteristics. Some components, some parts, some requirements, all right, have a higher criticality than others. So, for example, in aviation, space, and defense, wing attach fittings, typically made out of some kind of titanium type alloy. If it fails, the wing's going to fall off. A bad day if you're on the plane, right? So we have requirements where we make sure we control those areas tighter than we have other types of requirements that don't have the same level of criticality. Special requirements could be things, for example, that we've tried before, but we've not really done very well. Or it could be that something that's pushing the state of the art, right? So therefore, I include those things with regards to my risk assessment process as well. Supplier sub-tier controls, right? We want to make sure that with the majority of the price of our products coming from suppliers, to make sure we have adequate controls, and we've extended that in this last revision to sub-tiers as well. We have additional requirements for measurement traceability with so many issues and concerns with cybersecurity. We have requirements for it, as well as special processes, things that you can't really tell if, they're compliant. You have to verify that the process is working very well. So how well are we auditing to these, and are organizations compliant to these? Well, here's the nonconformities from the Americas. So you see that in the title for 2019. So the total nonconformities that we have for the year is 17,184. Of those, almost 2,000 were majors, a little over 15,000 were minors. If we look at how those are distributed across all the standards, you'll see that typically what you've seen in the past as far as major drivers are what we're still seeing. So the number one clause that has top number of nonconformities is control of products and service provision, clause 851. Second, 843, information for external providers. What kind of information you're providing to your supply base to procure your parts. Next, 7152, measurement traceability, usually dealing with calibration type issues. The next, 8411, how we control external providers. And then finally, nonconformity corrective action. So the green lines of the bar chart show the number of minors. The red shows the number of majors. It should not surprise anybody familiar with the aviation, space, and defense scheme that 1021 has the largest number of major nonconformities. Why is that? Because for aviation, space, and defense, if we see a repeat nonconformity during the next audit, we will write a major against your corrective action process and reissue that nonconformity again. So that's why you see the red for denoting major nonconformities being the highest for 1021. So let's move on to the next area, the next tool, and that is understanding requirements. Obviously, I think we'd all agree that understanding requirements is critical to the success of our quality management system. Obviously, we comply with ISO 9001, AS 9100, whatever your particular scheme mandates. You may also get corporate requirements from your corporate office. Your organization defines certain requirements that you're required to go comply with, as well as external requirements. Well, what kind of external requirements are we talking about? Well, things like customer requirements, for example. Obviously, if we don't review and understand customer requirements, we're not going to have the customer satisfaction and acceptance of products and services that we're looking for. They'll be returned to us because we're not meeting those customer requirements. We also have statutory regulatory requirements, right? It's important for our system to meet those requirements to ensure we're compliant, we're not having any penalties, fines, disapproval, customer dissatisfaction. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about these customer and regulatory understanding of these requirements. One of the things we've done within aviation, space, and defense is we took a look at both EASA and FAA. Here in the United States, you're probably much more familiar with FAA requirements. EASA is the European equivalent. Part 21 is for manufacturers. So we did some mapping of those requirements to our AS 9100 standard. We also took a look at Part 145 EASA and FAA requirements and mapped those against our maintenance, repair, and overhaul standard 9110. So I'll show you some examples. So if you go out to our website, what you'll see this correlation matrix, and this is taking the 9100 against the EASA Part 21 requirements. Okay? Now, you see kind of the disclaimers down at the bottom. This provides a correlation mapping. This does not mean, hey, if you follow 9100, you're going to meet all of the requirements. That's not what this is saying. The whole intent of this is to show you interactions, interrelationships. So maybe if you're doing a quality management system audit, you can see, oh, I also should be verifying these FAA or these EASA type of requirements. Can also help you with regards to your audit scope and criteria with regards to developing your audit plan. So here's an example. This happens to be EASA Part 145. And you see the requirements here in subpart A and B. And what you'll see is, for example, wow, quality policy, that kind of maps to a requirement within 9100, 9110, right? Communicating the quality policy, the system and its processes, customer communications, determining requirements, reviewing the requirements for products and services. All right, so you can see, for example, for this particular EASA 145 requirement, there's numerous clauses of ISO 9001, 9100, 9110 that are applicable. This shows you a little bit of the structure. So obviously, in the left-hand column, you see clause title, context of the organization. So we're talking 4.1 here, 4.2 with understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. And there you can see kind of the reference to the FAA Part 21. So this is now mapping the 9100 to FAA Part 21 requirements. Okay, so once again, it shows a relationship. Now I'd like to walk you through the third tool. Has to deal with support materials. First, I'd like to talk to you about some 9100 support materials. It satisfies all of our certification standards. So that's 9100, 9110, and 9120. It can be found on the iaqg.org website under standards. Also, we have an excellent source of best practices called the Supply Chain Management Handbook. There's numerous chapters and information on here are some processes, here are some best practices, here's some implementation guidance. So I would encourage you to go take a look at that material. Excellent. So where to find it? If you go to the iaqg.org, this is what our new website looks like. You'll go ahead and click where it says standards. Also, I would bring up to your attention that if you were trying to go to the supply chain management handbook, you see that up in the dark blue right above it, okay? But if you're going to look at the support materials, you'd click on standards. Then it provides all the 26 standards that IEQG publishes. So we're going to look here at the 9100, right? So we would click on that. And here it gives you a bunch of information. First, it tells you the clarifications that have been issued with regards to 9100. Some of these clarifications have to deal with the 9100 additional requirements. Other clarifications could even be against the ISO 9001 requirements as applied to the aviation, space, and defense industry. So an excellent source of information so you can kind of understand the applicability. Next, you'll see the Aerospace Improvement Maturity Model. If you click on that, I'll show you what that looks like at the end of the presentation. Then we have guidance materials, including things like frequently asked questions, gap assessment worksheets, evaluation guidance material. Evaluation guidance material is like, here are some questions by clause that you could go utilize to try to, stir some thoughts about different ways to go do this. I've seen this used by auditors to kind of get through kind of a log jam. What's the next question I want to ask? As well as organizations implementing to say, I'm really struggling. What are some different ways that this could be done? All right, so evaluation guidance material. Also, we have a table, C1, that's attached to the back of 9100. We keep that table up to date. It's a cross-reference to all of our standards. What we want to do, obviously, it was up to date as the publication of our standard in 2016, but several standards have been released since then. So that's the most up-to-date version of that. Okay. Correlation materials. If you want to see correlation between the previous version, the current version, then we also have the FAA and EASA correlation matrix that I briefed earlier. Presentations. An executive overview as well as an overview presentation. This can be real helpful if you're trying to educate people in your organizations about the standard itself. There's also some articles that are available. I mentioned the December 2019 article, Reaching New Heights. There's where you can download that and take a look at that. Also, there's numerous references and resources from ISO 9001, all right? So we put it here on our IAQG website just for ease, because there's such good materials, and since our standard is based upon ISO 9001, we want to make sure that the materials were easily referenced. So let me talk a little bit more about the ISO 9001 if you want to go to it directly. Here is the website. I'll pause there so you can take a look at this. Also, I'm going to show you here real shortly about how to go access that. It's also available through the TC176 website, Quality Systems, Quality Assurance. So committee.iso.org/home/TC176. If you go there, you see there you can hit SC2, that's subcommittee 2. That's the group that writes the ISO 9001 standards and 9004 standards. Here it is. We can go down to see more about ISO 9001. If you wanted to get some information on ISO 9000, here's the Subcommittee 1 website. And then voila, here we go. Here's all the different materials talking about more details about ISO 9001, as well as where to go get additional information. You see here that references ISO 9004, as well as guidance and implementation guidance on ISO 9001:2015. So you see here a paper on ISO and risk-based thinking, document information, right? What they try to do is any new areas of the standard, they try to have a white paper to kind of provide more guidance on. Here's some information about the process approach, okay? Some good materials. Finally, I want to point you to the auditing support material. If you go to this auditing practices group, it is part of ISO TC 176. So we have people, experts from all around the world representing their countries, and they provide this guidance material on how to audit. This material is primarily geared towards third-party auditors, but it certainly can be used for first-party internal audits, second-party supplier audits as well. So it's separated into two main topical areas. The first being general, how do we add value during audits? Code of conduct and ethics during auditing, cultural aspects, expected outcomes, impartiality during auditing, how to deal with technical experts, and then the certification audit activities. And then the second area is more auditing type activities. This is a huge list. All right, so this is just kind of a little snippet of it. There's also topics like how to audit leadership, how to audit management review. So quite a bit of excellent material here in the auditing support, the auditing practices group. So the fourth area I'd like to provide a recommended tool is improvement standards. The thought here is, our quality management system, whether you're talking about ISO 9001, 9100, it really sets the minimum expectations on how to ensure effective organizational performance, right? But we have other tools as well. First, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about these on the future slides. ISO TS, which stands for Technical Specification, 9002. Guidelines for the application of ISO 9001:2015, an excellent resource. ISO 9004 came out a couple years after ISO 9001, talking about quality at the organizational level, guidance to achieve sustained success. We have a whole bunch of ISO 10,000 series documents. IAQG, AAQG has improvement standards. So why would you go start doing searches for content if we have all this material and all these standards, right? Why don't you go ahead and look at what are some tried and true, proven, globally accepted methodologies for documenting your processes, for ensuring process effectiveness, and just how to go get further detailed information on different aspects of your quality management system. So let's first talk about this ISO TS 9002. First, and it's important, Technical Committee 176 published this document, the same group that wrote ISO 9001:2015. The benefit of this document is that it provides a lot more details. It's a guidance standard, and where the requirement document, ISO 9001, is about 19 pages long, right? ISO TS 9002 is about 44 pages, more than twice as long. It has the same clause by clause correlation as what you'll see in ISO 9001. So for example, ISO 9001 will say, here's what the requirement is. ISO TS 9002 will explain, this is kind of what we were thinking about. This is what the explanation is with regards to where we were going with regards to that particular requirement. You'll see more in-depth information on new requirements versus requirements that have been around for quite a while. You'll have different examples, different steps organizations can take to meet the standards. It's a guidance document. It's not meant to add requirements, subtract to, or any way modify the requirements within ISO 9001. It also doesn't prescribe any mandatory approaches to implementation. So you would never use this as an auditing document, for example. Okay? So let me go back and talk about the fact that this is such an excellent resource to say, what is that requirement in ISO 9001? And what was the committee really getting at? You could go look at ISO TS 9002 for some additional insights. I will also tell you that the co-conveners that wrote ISO or led the development of ISO 9001 were also the same co-conveners that led the effort with regards to ISO TS 9002. So you have some consistency. So this is kind of hard to read, I understand. This just shows you, illustrates what I'm talking about. So this is a new requirement. This is clause 4.1 in ISO 9001 2015, understanding the organization and its context. All right, now let's look. ISO TS 9002 provides all this additional information, some background. Here's different areas you could look at for external issues, internal issues, almost 4 times as much information explaining what the requirements of 4.1 are all about. Okay, excellent, excellent resource. Now let's go talk about ISO 9004 2018. Right, the focus here is on customer satisfaction, just like it is for ISO 9001. All right, but here you talk more organizationally rather than with regards to a quality management system. So you're going kind of from product and service quality to organizational quality for sustained success. Sustained success being critical, right? Because we want our enterprise, our organization to be around, right? Just like you want your suppliers to be around, right? Your customers want you to be around. Just like ISO 9001, very much of a focus that this is led by top management. Also, it takes a look at what are the needs and expectations of customers, relevant interested parties. Once again, just like ISO 9001. There is a self-assessment tool within Annex A, so you can kind of see how your organization kind of has adopted some of these concepts. It provides that gap to say, here are some areas where we're kind of rated kind of low. Maybe that should be an area that we go look at for some improvements. And then you can go back once again to some of the guidance material, some of these other standards to go help close that gap. Here's a representation of ISO 9004 2018. Clause 5, it talks about the context of the organization with internal and external issues. Here you see Clause 6 talks about the identity of an organization, things like mission, the vision of the organization, the values, the culture. What's very interesting about this is, first of all, it's kind of soft skills. It's kind of soft areas that auditors kind of hate seeing in standards because, like, how do I audit these things? But I think anybody who's been familiar with quality management system knows that when they go into a company or an organization, they don't have a quality culture. They don't value certification. They're very short-term, profit-oriented vision. All right. So these are critical with regards to sustainability of the enterprise, compliance with regards to your quality management system, and being able to drive customer satisfaction. Clause 7 talks to leadership, strategy, developing the strategy, identifying what's the policy, and then objectives of how we're going to go achieve that strategy and the policy. Clause 8 on process management. Clause 9, resource management. Clause 10, how do we analyze and performance evaluation, improvement, learning, and innovation, Clause 11. So this provides kind of a different lens with some more advanced type concepts and thinking than what's in ISO 9001 that you can maybe go look at for ways to go improve your quality management system. Here's an example of the self-assessment tool. This has to deal with clause 7.3 on objectives. And you can see that it has 5 different levels, so you can determine which level am I at by reading the descriptive item and say, yep, that's where we're at, and then you can kind of see where we're kind of falling short. TC 176 also publishes numerous ISO 10000 series documents, both within Subcommittee 2 and primarily Subcommittee 3. So we have numerous documents dealing with customer satisfaction. ISO 10001 through 10004 and 10008 pertain to customer satisfaction. 10005 with regard to quality plans. So for example, this particular customer, we kind of do things a little bit different for them. So instead of altering my whole quality management system, I can have a quality plan that says, here's what we do a little bit different for this particular customer. 10006, quality management and projects. Once again, how do we manage projects to ensure that we're doing good planning up front, right? And that those items can be delivered in a quality manner on time. 10007, I've already made a comment about this. We were talking about configuration management. It's an excellent standard. We used to even have this called out in 9100 as a reference. We even had different steps called out for configuration management that map back to ISO 10007. We simplified it for this last revision. About 60% of our certified organizations are under 100 people. So you deal with a lot of smaller organizations and you talk about configuration status accounting, configuration audit and such, and they're not terms that people readily understand. So we simplified the language. But if you want to really improve your configuration management program, would highly recommend looking at ISO 10007. Recently revised, went through very minor changes because it was viewed as a very robust standard. 10012, requirements for measurement processes, measuring equipment. 10013, quality management system documentation, right? That's received a significant change with documented information. So that's currently in revision. 10014, guidelines for realizing financial economic benefits. I recently just reviewed the draft of that document. It's getting very near publication. It would be excellent, really a value-added new standard. 10015, guidelines and training. It says new revision. It was revised in December, so it's hot off the press. So if your organization is struggling with regard to its training system, learning management system, how to establish competencies and such, you might want to go take a look at 10015. 10,017, statistical techniques, different types of statistical techniques for how to go improve your system. 10,018, people involvement and competence. Once again, this is currently in revision and being up to date, being updated. And then finally, 10,019, use of consultants and use of their services. Also within IEQG, AAQG, we also have improvement standards. So I know this looks like a very busy chart, but here in the middle, in the pale blue with the green boxes around them, you'll see 9100, 9110, 9120. Those are our certification standards. 9101, our QMS audit. I believe that some of our auditing activities, especially with our PAIR documents, process effectiveness assessment reports, our QMS matrix, are very good, and I'd highly recommend it to performance of auditing activities. Here you see our 9104 trilogy is what we call it. The 1 dealing with certification, 2 dealing with the oversight activity, 3 dealing with auditing. We also have at the bottom of the first blue box 9115 QMS software. So if you have deliverable software, an excellent standard that says, hey, here's how to apply that particular quality management system requirement to software. If there's no additional requirement, like let's say, for example, in management review, there may not say no additional software application. But where there is, it can provide some insights to how to apply the standard into a software environment. 9137, we want to ensure that our standards are recognized by the defense community. We have NATO countries that exercise AQUAPs, Allied Quality Assurance Publications, and this shows the mapping between 9100 and AQUAPs. The next blue box shows some of the other flow down standards, improvement standards that IAQG publishes. I won't go through all of these. Probably by far, FAI, First Article Inspection, 9103, key characteristics of how we control variation. So the most popular, 9145, APQP, PPAPs. We received quite a bit of insight and help from automotive and the development of that standard. 9146 FOD. So we used to have, there's a standard out there, NAS 412. A lot of shoulds in that document. The team kind of took a look at that and kind of made them more into shall statements, but a very good document. Then, of course, down below, you see our Supply Chain Improvement Handbook, and you see it's organized by process. So you might wonder, how come, what's with all the red border, yellow border, green border? What it does is it shows our current activity. So the red shows standards that are currently in revision. The yellow, what's going to be launched in 2020, this year. And then in green, the 2021 launch. Of course, the 9100 series of standards, we expect to have a new launch for those standards in the 2021 timeframe, coinciding with the 5-year review period. So additional information, I talked about ISO 9004. There's an excellent quality progress article from August 2018 by the 2 gentlemen who led the revision of that activity. So I refer that to you. The 10,000 series, all right, a well-known secret that was published in November 2018. Myself and Paul Palms wrote that. And then the 9100 series of standards, right, the complete package, May 2019. The last area I want to provide as a tool is Aerospace Improvement Maturity Model. we call it AIM. So it's first of all based upon the 9100 standard. So it is ISO 9001 based, right? Why do we have established this document? We want to go beyond 9100 compliance and effectiveness. Today, with audits, you're either compliant or non-compliant. We want to look at a tool using maturity model for organizational improvements. A tool that can go set clear targets for improvement, provide recognition of improvement within your organization to help you zero in on here's some areas where we need to go improve our system, enhance motivation, and increase quality levels for the whole industry is what we're looking for. Okay. So let's see. Yep. I talked about many of these things, right? Move to maturity, set clear targets, all right? Increase level of quality. It can be used for either certified or non-certified organizations. You could do a self-assessment. Right now, it is a self-assessment that will be done by the organization. There are no plans at this time for certification bodies, for example, to get involved in this activity. And the way you can do this, you could do it either for the whole scope of your quality management system or a specific area of interest. So let's say, for example, as part of your organizational focus, you want to be really recognized for your design and development capabilities. So you might want to go in and go do a AIM assessment on design and development to see what's your maturity level. What are some things I need to go do to go move to the next level of maturity? So it is from the processes go from level 1 to level 5. Level 1 initial, where your outcomes are reactive, not repeatable. Level 2 managed, they're consistently achieved, but mainly at a project or product level. Level 3 deployed, right? We're achieving our expected outcomes across the organization. Level 4 being predictable, where we're managing systematically based upon quantitative targets measured and then optimized, best in class, continuous improvement, efficiencies, innovations. So we take these 5 levels, right? Here they're across the x-axis, you see here in the kind of the peach. And what we do is we have for each expected outcome of the standard, we have what are some of the characteristics that we're looking for that particular level, okay? So you would then, from the tool, pick, yep, here's where we're at with regards to the level of maturity. So right now, the way the tool works is you put a 0 or 1 for each criteria, row by row. It gives you a percentage of achievement, right? You do it for each module. You don't do it overall. And so, like, let's say, I'll try to explain this. For maturity level N is achieved. So let's say maturity level 3, expected outcome for that level are largely achieved. So I can claim to be level 3 if 85% of my outcomes are in level 3 maturity and expected outcomes of N-1 are fully achieved. So that'd be level 2. So yep, I've mastered all the level 2 criteria and at least 85% or so of my level 3s, then that tells me I'm at the level 3 level of maturity. So it does it based upon the areas of assessment. It does not aggregate the data. So you can see here on the lower right, a little spider chart that shows here are different areas that weren't assessed, and then the maturity levels for those areas of assessment. Easy, transparent to use. So we've done a great job. We are right now have developed the majority of the modules. Right now we're developing batch 4. And you'll notice that there's kind of a for each line, there's like a blue, kind of a rust, and then kind of a green. That stands for the development cycle. So the blue is the drafting of it. So you see here we're in our last batch for drafting. Then we're going to give it to the entire team for review. Then what we do is after we give it to the whole team for review, we validate. We have several companies, I believe about a dozen companies from all around the world, representative, big companies, small companies, medium size, from all the different 3 sectors that IAQD does business, and they validate and give us feedback. You see here a little bit of a slip for the release of the material. We want to make sure that the right controls are in place before we start releasing this material. If you go online to the iaqg.org, you hit the AIM, and it'll tell you a little bit about what's happening with regards to the AIM module. So I hope that you saw something in this presentation to bring back to your organization for QMS improvement. It could be maybe just a standard here, or here's some support material, but there's no sense in recreating the wheel. Hopefully you saw some things that will improve. If you have any questions, you can feel free to contact me. My email is consultbuddy@gmail.com.
And thank you, Buddy Cressionnie, for that in-depth look at moving beyond QMS requirements. And that concludes this presentation.